Hello, I want to share a little bit with you today about application deadlines. And I know that's not the most exciting topic, but it's a very, very important topic and one that can make a big difference in terms of what you pay for college. So, application deadlines, each year there are different application deadlines that your teen can use for their applications for college. One of the deadlines is just a regular deadline. And a regular deadline is usually around the January time frame. And it could be a little bit later than that, but nothing special about the regular deadline. The thing to remember is that application deadlines are very unforgiving. And so your team just needs to make sure that they meet that deadline. So regular decision, that's a standard deadline. Another deadline you may hear about is rolling. Now, the rolling deadline just means that your team can submit their application at any time, and usually they'll get a notice back of a decision about 3, maybe 4 weeks later. Sometimes it could be sooner, depending on the time of year. But the rolling deadline is one that really isn't a cut and dry deadline. So it could start perhaps as soon as the October timeframe, and it could just keep going until a final deadline, which means that all the applications have to be in by that time, and that could be even as late as the spring of their senior year. So we've talked about regular, we talked about rolling. Now I want to talk about 2 other deadlines that often can be a little bit confusing because they start with the same word. So one of them is early action. Early action is non-binding, which means that your team can apply to an early action deadline. They will find out, usually they'll find out the decision perhaps around the December, mid to late December timeframe. And it gives them a little bit of ease, especially if they do get admitted during an early action, after an early action deadline, because they'll know pretty much where their application stands. And if they want to apply to some additional colleges, they still have time to do that under the regular deadline. The 4th deadline I want to talk about, it also starts with early, and it's called early decision. Now, early decision is a little bit more strict in that the early decision deadline is binding. And every year, there are a lot of families that will apply under the early decision deadline. With the early decision deadline, because it's binding, you cannot apply to any other colleges that have any type of restrictive deadlines, and you want to make sure that you read the fine print on that. But early decision deadline is one that the parents have to sign off on, meaning that if your teen chooses an early decision deadline, you also have to sign off on it. Also, the school counselor will be notified as well. The key thing with the early decision deadline is that it means that if your teen is admitted, they must go to that college regardless of financial aid. And so this is where sometimes I will see families who decide to do the early decision deadline because that's the only one that a particular college offers for them, either early decision or regular. And generally with the earlier application rounds, they will be, oftentimes the admissions rate is a little bit more favorable. And so families want to make sure that their teen, has the best shot in terms of admissions. So they will go ahead and exercise that option to use the early decision deadline. But soon thereafter, after that decision, if it comes back positive in December, you have a short window of time to withdraw all of your other applications and to submit your deposit to hold your space. So that's a really serious deadline. And sometimes families will say, oh, I didn't know, I thought we would be eligible for financial aid. And they get a surprise that they don't get any additional aid. And then it's trying to figure out, okay, how do we pay for it? And so it's really a very serious deadline, and one that I certainly wouldn't take lightly. It's certainly your family's choice if you decide to do the early decision round, but just know that it means that you will be going, your teen will be going if they get admitted, regardless of what the financial aid is. At least with the early action option, you have a chance to look at what the financial offers are from other colleges as well. But again, some colleges will offer only the early decision deadline, and then others may have an early action, or they could also have an early decision as well. But these application deadlines, as I mentioned at the outset, can be unforgiving in that you do need to meet the deadline if you want your application to be considered. One thing I will say also about the very late regular decision deadline, so sometimes some colleges will say the deadline is, June 1st. They will be filling those seats, and for colleges that may have a very late regular decision deadline, it doesn't mean that you can apply on May 31st and there's still seats available. So just keep that in mind in terms of from a planning standpoint. So I look forward to hearing from you in terms of other questions that you may have about application deadlines, because they're going to make a big difference in terms of what you could end up paying, and in some cases where your teen gets admitted. Look forward to seeing you next time.